I'm really glad that you're here. I want to be talking, or, wrapping up what I've been posting about this week on grief and, um, what's come up for everyone. I know that for myself, in what always fascinates me when I start sharing on certain topics is how it shows up in my own personal life. Because when I'm drafting these posts ahead of time, I'm pulling on, past experiences, even if it's recent experiences. It's not stuff that's in the moment. However, both these past weeks, the subject matter has really shown up and has been present in my own life in interesting ways. So, still trying to figure out how to see any comments that are showing up on here because I'm not on my phone, I'm on my computer. Maybe I should have been on my phone. Um, let's see. Ah oui. Bonjour Anouk et bonjour Marie. Euh, je vois les commentaires sur mon autre écran, c'est pour ça que je regarde par ici. Comment allez-vous? C'est le fun de voir vos noms. Ça fait super longtemps non, que je t'ai vu. Alors, c'est le fun de t'avoir en personne. Yeah, so as I was saying, having these conversations that are showing up in my day to day, and having people around me go through something that I've just recently written about, and hearing from people that are resonating with what it is that I've been sharing. It's really nice to see that it's helping people navigate through some stuff that is happening in real time. Um, so when it comes to grief, what shows up for me is my first experience of loss, which is when I lost my grandfather. I was 9 or 10. It was back in 1986, and not fully understanding what it meant to lose someone permanently, even though I fully believe in afterlife and that no one is fully gone, but there's still that emptiness in the way that we are humans and our expectations of what, really important figure in our lives are going to be a constant fixture. It's when we're young, it is a really galvanizing experience to go through that. Um, and how do we prepare people for it? How do we prepare our children for loss? When I then later as an adult lost my best friend several years ago, she died of cancer, and I was, my experience of her passing was entirely different because I was able to be with her, be with the body, which some people find really, really upsetting. But for me, it provided me with a clear understanding that when the spirit leaves, the body really, it's that's not who a person is. Um, and so it made it easier for me to let go of my expectation of who and how a person shows up to you. It was seeing that difference, that spark not being in the body made me really understand that that person has moved on. And that was probably the first time that I fully allowed myself to grieve in the moment, which I think is extremely powerful. This is the work that I do, is not holding the emotions inside. If you're able to release them in the moment, it allows you to move through the experience a lot more smoothly. Being that it doesn't get solidified in the body or like held in the body and just staying with you for longer periods of time and creating obstacles that need to be overcome later on. All right, so I see that there's a third person here. Who else is here? All right. So for the third person, I think it might be Steph. Hey, Steph. Steph, I'm realizing that doing the live on my computer, I can't see the comments in the live screen. So I've got my other screen and another tab open so I can see any comments. Anyways, so talking about grief, kind of wandering. I'm less prepared here. I'm just kind of in the moment, but going with the flow. Expressing that grief is something that we're not taught to do. And if you read my newsletter and my blog, then you will have seen that I've recently experienced a pretty deep loss. That it wasn't not a death. I don't want to get into the specifics of it, but the elements of it were really, really profound. And when I went into ceremony with this kind of tucked away, not fully realizing that I was holding on to it as much as I was, and having the ceremony really allowed me to release that deep grief that I'd been kind of tucking away. So like me, even though this is my work, this is what I do, I still struggle with these things, even though I know it's best to let them go. And so shifting into that full surrender while I was in ceremony was extremely healing and kind of frightening, because of that kind of deep abyss that we don't know what grief holds in that deep abyss, but it still calls for us to surrender. And I think that what can be really scary for people is that in that surrender, we can be afraid that we'll never emerge from the other side. But there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. There is always a way out. There's always a way to transition out of it. And it's the surrender that creates that space, And so in that deep sadness, if you surrender to it, knowing that, yes, you're alone in the grief, but letting people in around you to hold space for you while you're in that surrender, that's what these rites of passage and these ceremonies are for. We have memorial services, we have ceremonies, funerals, and what I would love to see is a shift into welcoming the show of emotion with it. One of my other areas of work in my life is I work with lawyers who do estate planning. So they help people plan for their death, because we are all, there's only one way out. No one gets to skip the part where you die. And so, I have this deep awareness of honoring that space for when people pass on. And passing on may not mean death. It may mean, the end of a relationship. It's the end of friendships. It can be, the end of a job or a career. Those all have elements of grief with it. Even if it's a really great thing, if it's a great transition, you can still grieve it, right? So I'm curious about how this is landing for those of you who are here. Still got a couple of people watching. What are your relationships to grief? How is this showing up? Has this showed up for you at all over the past week or couple of months? Wrapping up a long extended period of being in quarantine. A lot of people experience grief during that. Grief is something that you can't avoid, even if you pretend it's not happening. It shows up in really subtle ways. So my call for everyone is to make space for it when it shows up. Acknowledge it. That's really my strategy for everything. Is make space to acknowledge and feel it. Let it move through you rather than holding on to it. All right. Well, this is my first live of many to come. This coming week, I'm going to be sharing about anxiety. That was the vote. I gave choices between anger and anxiety. So anxiety won, and I've already got situations with people around me that are showing up. That's helping highlight the pieces I need to remember to share about next week. So I want to wish everyone a beautiful Friday and a beautiful weekend. And if you'd like for me to talk on certain things, you can just drop it in the chat here, or you can message me directly if you don't want to be public about it. And if you haven't checked out my website lately, please go over to jessicadawncoaching.com. Bunch of changes made over at the website, a bunch of updates. My work is evolving, I'm evolving, we're all evolving, one would hope. And if you want to sign up for my newsletter, there's always a few extra goodies in that. And I will catch you later. Oh, there's another person on. Let's see, who else is here? I can't see who else is here. And if you haven't checked out my website. All right. So I am going to wrap this up once I figure out how to end the video. Okay, here, end my video. Next week, I'll be more up to speed with stuff. Okay, bye everyone.